Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Elias.
My name is Maida.
Guys, today we are gonna react to a mrballen video. I am not really familiar with the genre, but people tell me they're very interesting stories. So today we're gonna be watching the top 3 photos, disturbing backstories. But yeah, I don't know what I'm into or what I'm getting into, but yeah. Are you ready, Maida?
Yes, I'm ready.
Alright, let us begin. Loana the Bloodthirster.
In 1909, Loana Constantinescu was a 27-year-old woman living in the Romanian city of Timișoara. Loana was a devout practitioner of Zoroastrianism, which is one of the world's oldest organized religions that began in ancient Persia and is now practiced primarily in East Asia. In the city that Loana was living in, it was majority Christian, and they looked at Zoroastrians as witches. As such, Loana was persecuted and ostracized primarily by these 2 Christian ministers that spread a rumor
Oh my
that
God.
she was drinking the blood
What the
of local
fuck?
children and that she worshipped Satan.
Looks like the guy
That
from
rumor
Lord of the
would
Rings.
spread and grow to the point where everybody knew Loana as like the singular witch of all the Zoroastrians in the city, and it ultimately incited this angry Christian mob to storm her house on October 21st, 1909, and rip her into the streets and savagely beat her to within an inch of her life. She would survive this
Dang.
lynching, and she would be taken to a hospital where she'd be treated for severe.
Isn't it crazy how that was acceptable before? Just because you thought this lady was a witch, just kind of drag her from her home and just kill her?
Mm-hmm.
For blunt force injuries and lacerations, but after 2 days of being in the hospital when she had not made a full recovery at all, she checked herself out and headed home. The next day, Loana was found dead in her apartment, and her family and friends initially believed that she had died as a result of the injuries she had sustained from the angry mob, and that perhaps she had checked herself out of the hospital too soon, and untreated, that's why she must have passed away early. But when the authorities arrived at her house and began looking at the scene, it did not look like she had died as a result of those injuries. It looked more like some sort of ritual suicide. She was laying on this sofa with her arms over her chest. Next to the sofa was an altar that was adorned with strange occult symbols and ritual herbs and effigies, and on the altar was this goblet with deep, dark red stains on the inside. When they looked at Loana, even though she was fully dressed, underneath her sleeves were all these cuts on her arms, and there were cuts on her legs as well.
What the
After her
fuck?
autopsy, the medical examiner said she had died from a combination of blood loss and internal shock from ingesting massive quantities of blood that triggered cardiac
fuck?
arrest. Loana had been draining her own blood into the sacramental goblet, drinking it, and then doing it over and over again until she died. Locals believed that that was not just a ritual suicide, but rather she was placing a curse on her enemies. Almost immediately following her death, those 2 Christian ministers that had spread those rumors about her that led to the mob coming and attacking her, they both died of an extremely rare blood-borne illness.
Wait, so were they right then? She's kind of a witch if she killed them? I mean, I don't know.
guess, they died of something.
Blood related?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then immediately following their demise, the 2 primary vigilantes that actually organized that mob that would attack Loana, they both died. One was hit by a falling tree and another died in a fire. And according to more recent accounts, Loana's curse didn't end with the death of her tormentors. There have been dozens of reports of people after seeing this image, which is of Loana after she was discovered by authorities in her home, that they will have bouts of extreme sleep paralysis. These are people that have never had sleep paralysis before, that this picture somehow induces sleep paralysis in them.
Hell
They're
nah.
cursed by Loana.
Good luck tonight,
So now
Maida.
that you've seen this image, you're cursed too. So you're welcome.
Alright, that was the first story. That was weird. Disturbing, yeah. She killed herself by drinking her own blood over and over and over again after they beat the shit out of her for being a witch. Allegedly, right? And then the 2 priests that got her
Religion
arrested.
is like a very strong, especially back in the days, I feel. So
Yeah, back
like
in days-
anyone that didn't like follow the normal or majority of like religion, whatever that was going on in the town, was like a witch or something like that.
Imagine you're a woman in the 1500s or whatever, and you have an orgasm, and they kill you because you're a witch.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's continue. Story number 2, 25 years later.
In 1876, Blanche Monnier was a beautiful 25-year-old from a very wealthy,
Sorry, guys.
prominent family in Paris who desperately wanted to find a husband and move out of her mother's home and start her own life. The man she would fall in love with was not a young, rich aristocrat like her family was hoping, but instead was an older, poor lawyer. Her mother told her that she needed to break off this relationship and find a more suitable suitor, but Blanche refused and said she was in love with this man.
Wait, what is her name? Blanche?
Something like that. I was gonna say, she should get with a
That sounds
boyfriend.
like-
How are you a poor lawyer?
That sounds like the name of that movie where they go into a house and there's a witch. The Bleached Witch or Blade. I don't know.
I don't know. Let me go back.
Blanche refused and said she was in love with this man.
Blanche.
When her mother outright forbid her from seeing this man ever again, she refused and began sneaking out at night to spend time with this guy and was away from the home quite a bit, just kind of escaping her mom. But during this tumultuous time where Blanche is very much at odds with her mother, Blanche would unexpectedly die. And since this is the late 1800s, people
That
did
don't sound
at a
familiar
young
to
age,
me,
they just
Blanche.
unexpectedly died. And so her lover and her family and society mourned her loss, but ultimately time went on and people moved on. 25 years later, in 1901, French police received this strange handwritten letter that just basically states that the Monnier family has a very dirty secret, and you should go check their estate out. Now, the Monnier family was in excellent standing in Paris. I mean, they were one of the more prominent families. The mother, she was known for her charitable works. They were just one of those families that everybody knew, including certainly the French police. And so when they got this letter, they weren't actually that concerned that there was any truth to this letter, but they felt like it was their duty to at least go knock on the Monnier family's door, show them the letter, and then just take a look around. And so they did that. They showed up, they showed the Monnier family, including her mother who was at the door, hey, we have this letter. Would you mind if we looked around? The Monnier family was very cooperative. They let them walk around their whole big estate, and the police didn't find anything. As they're chatting in the doorway, getting ready to leave, because this is all just a big misunderstanding, one of the officers turns and looks up a little flight of stairs that they hadn't gone up, and notices a small door that's been padlocked shut, and it's the only door at the end of this one stairwell. And he says off the cuff to the family, well, what's in that door up there? And Blanche's mother says, oh, that's a supply closet. You know, our assistants come in and they'll go in there and use that. And the French police officers say, well, would you mind if we just poked our heads in? It's the only space we haven't checked, and since we're already here, we'll just check that box. We'll go in there and poke our heads in. At this point, the Monnier family says, no, we're not going to let you go in there because you don't need to. It's just a supply closet.
Oh, that's
now the
weird.
police say, you're going to go ahead and open up that door. At which point the family says, no, we're not. So one of the officers tells the family to stay right here, while the other officer goes up the stairs to try to break open this lock and see what's in there. As soon as he's right outside the door, he's hit with this overwhelmingly disgusting smell. It smells like rotting flesh. It smells like death. He covers his mouth and he breaks open the lock and he opens the door, and there in the middle of this dark, disgusting smelling room on a rotting straw mattress is none other than Blanche Monnier. 25 years later, she is alive. She barely weighs 55 pounds and she's chained to a bed. She has not come out of those chains or moved off of that bed in 25 years. The smell was so bad that could barely be in there for longer than a few minutes at a time. But one of the officers immediately goes over and knocks down some of the wood that was blocking up the windows, and sunlight pours into the room, and it's the first time Blanche Monnier is seeing sunlight in 25 years. The reason she had been imprisoned in this room is because 25 years earlier, when she was fighting with her mother about not seeing this poor commoner, and she wasn't willing to break off the relationship with him, her mother told her to go in this room and said, you can't come out until you tell me you're going to break it off.
That's crazy.
She was so in love with him that she said no. Her mother wouldn't let her leave. And then days turned into months, turned into years, turned into decades.
Dang.
And here we are, 25 years later, and she had never left that room. The mother and the brother of Blanche Monnier were arrested, and the public found out about this. And it incited a huge mob that went to their house. And it actually caused Blanche Monnier's mother to have a heart attack, and she would end up dying only a couple of days later.
Of the
She
guilt.
never had to serve any jail time or really answer to any of her crimes, and the brother was complicit in what was happening to Blanche Monnier, but he kind of weaseled his way out of it. As for Blanche Monnier, she was remarkably lucid when she came out of that room, and she commented on how lovely it was to breathe fresh air and to be in sunlight. She was brought to a hospital where she did make a recovery, but she was so screwed up from being in that room that she didn't really know how to function in society anymore. And so she was moved to a mental institution, and unfortunately she died about 10 years later.
Damn.
That's crazy.
Imagine your own parents did that to you, and then like you said, they can't operate in normal society anymore. They're fucked. Sad. The first one was okay, obviously sad too, but this one was worse.
Yeah, that's one was.
And this one's called Reluctant Cannibals. All right, let's see what this is about.
On October 13th, 1972, Uruguayan Flight 571 was flying from Uruguay to Chile for a rugby game. On board were 45 people. There was 5 pilots and crew. The other 40 were the rugby team and their friends and relatives.
Crazy that this is an airplane story when, I don't know, when you guys see this recently in 2025, in February, we've had a lot of crashes already.
So they take off and they're making their way to Chile, and the pilot was relatively inexperienced and he made a fatal mistake. He believed it was time to make their descent into Chile, but he was actually about 70 kilometers early. So as he's descending through the clouds, he believes he's going to see a runway and land this plane. Instead, he sees the Andes Mountains, and it's too late to pull up out of the way. He basically nicked the mountain, causing the plane to start tumbling down at breakneck speeds, 350 kilometers per hour. As it's tumbling down the mountain, the tail breaks off and 7 people are sucked out immediately that all perish. It's blazing down this mountain, and then it comes to a crashing stop where on impact it kills the 2 pilots. But miraculously, of the 45 people on board, 33 were still alive when all the dust settled. But that night, 5 more people would perish from the freezing temperatures, and within a couple days...
The fact that some of them survived the 200 plus plane crash, that's crazy to me.
days of this crash landing, another person would die. Those who were still alive that weren't in a coma or critically injured used luggage and debris from the plane and seats to create shelter. And they actually started pulling out lipstick from inside of some of the passengers' luggage. And they tried to write SOS on the outside of the plane because the fuselage was still pretty clearly intact. But they
Like,
didn't
how
have
do
enough
you?
lipstick.
That's
They didn't
crazy.
have
How do
any
you
medical
do that in
supplies,
so
and they
little
didn't have
time?
proper clothing for the temperatures they were in.
Because
They
that
did
thing
not
had to have been
anticipate
going
being
fast
in
once it
minus 30
crashed.
degrees Celsius temperatures for extended periods of time. They
Damn, negative 22 Fahrenheit. That's
also had
crazy.
very, very little food, and it was running out very quickly. In a very cruel twist of fate, they actually found a working radio that allowed them to tune in and listen to the media as they tried to find them. And so they had to listen in horror after about a week when the search was called off because no one knew where they were, and the assumption was they must have all died in the crash.
What?
That's crazy. How do you not keep looking at least for the bodies so the families can like bury them or whatever?
The
It's just,
fact,
oh, we didn't find them. It's cool. Like, we'll just move on to the next case.
the fact that they heard everybody move on
Yeah.
is like, oh damn, that's so damning.
When the food finally ran out, survivors began eating the seats inside the plane, the leather and the cotton. But as they're doing this, they know what the next step has to be if they're going to survive.
Each other? Or the dead bodies?
They need to eat the
Crazy.
dead. And so on day 9 of the ordeal, the survivors ate the pilots. And they chose the
Oh my
pilots because
God.
they were the only people amongst the dead that they didn't personally know. The rest of the dead that they would ultimately eat were their friends and loved ones.
What?
Now, naturally, these people did not want to become cannibals, but virtually everyone, out of a need to survive, was able to make the adjustment. There were some people that couldn't, including one woman who didn't eat and ultimately died of starvation on day 60 because she just was not prepared to do what was necessary to survive. As if this situation wasn't bad enough, an avalanche would eventually strike the landing
Oh
site.
my God.
killing
What do these people do, man? They're getting fucking fucked. This reminds me of not Final Fantasy. What's that movie? Where they all die randomly from a plane crash, or it
The
was
Final
supposed to
Destination?
Final Destination. That when they skipped it and didn't get killed how they're supposed to, then they got killed
Oh,
ridiculously
yeah, well,
worse.
that's,
Like later
yeah.
on, same style, guys. The plane didn't kill you, but this fucking avalanche
Like,
might.
it's your destiny. You're
more
gonna
of these
die one
people
way or
that are doing everything they can to survive. But at the time of the avalanche, their food source had effectively run out, and so those 8 people who perished in the avalanche ultimately replenished their food source. From day 1, the survivors discussed climbing up and over the mountains and walking towards Chile to try to search for help. But the attempts so far had all failed due to extreme cold, malnutrition, altitude sickness. It was like they knew as soon as they walked over that mountain, they were going to die. And so many of them decided early on that they would rather just stay with the group because at least that way they would die as a group, or maybe by some stroke of luck they could still be discovered and they might be easier to discover as a big group. But 2 months after the crash, and with no help in
2
sight, they know the
months?
search has been called off, 2 of the survivors basically say, screw it. I'm going to make the trek over the Andes Mountains. We have no supplies, we have nothing, no map, no compass, no anything. We're just going to walk roughly in the direction of Chile, and you know what? We're either going to die here or we're going to die out there. And so the 2 take off. They somehow survived for 9 days, walking over the Andes Mountains with no equipment. They've been out for 60 plus days at this point, and they managed to walk into this valley, and they see that there are people living in this valley. There's actually a couple of fishermen right on the other side of this river. And so they go
What?
down to the edge of the river, and they're yelling out to these people on the other side. The fishermen couldn't make out what they were saying, and so the fishermen, they got a piece of paper, and they put a pencil in it and balled it up with a rock and threw it across the river. And they were able to write down that they had survived a plane crash. They were located back in that direction. There was 14 other survivors, and they desperately needed help. Balled it up, threw it back. 3 Chilean helicopters were spun up and sent off in their direction, and the 14 other survivors were able to be picked up, brought to safety, and all 16 would
What?
make a full physical recovery.
Those 2 guys are heroes. I'll be honest. They made a mission and they made it happen.
However, the most difficult thing they would ever have to recover from was becoming reluctant cannibals, which is something that haunts all of them to this day. And here is the famous final picture of inside Uruguayan Flight 571 just moments before they crashed into the Andes Mountain and had to go through that horrific 72-day ordeal. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know in the comments.
Damn.
what you
Imagine
thought
eating
of these
somebody.
stories, and I will get back to all the early comments.
It's crazy. Imagine doing all that and you ate somebody and then you didn't die. Talk about traumatic experience. Fuck. Alright, for Mr. Ballen video, this was crazy. And this is only part 1. Guys, leave 100 likes. Me and my wife want to watch part 2. 100 likes and we do it. Or if you have any other content creators that have videos like this, let us know in the comments. Yeah, guys, you already know what it is. Join the family. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Peace.
Peace.